Welcome to the Bourbon and Breakthroughs podcast, where entrepreneurs reveal their biggest breakthroughs, both in life and in business. I'm your host, Chris Goodman, and I'm a life and business coach on a mission to help people change their lives and grow their businesses. On this show, you'll get to distill your own life-changing lessons from my friends, clients, and the best entrepreneurs around the world. During our conversation, we feature and taste a new or notable bourbon, or something like it, and raise a glass to personal development, business growth, and squeezing every drop out of life. So whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur or just starting out, join us for this episode of Bourbon and Breakthroughs. Cheers. Hey, and welcome back to Bourbon and Breakthroughs. Today, I'm sitting down with my good friend, Pat Mancuso. You might have heard him on the previous episodes when we did the podcast. It was called Relentless Growth. So if you missed him, you can always scroll back in the episodes and find him there. That was a great show. Every time I talk with Pat, it's packed with tons and tons of value. So whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on iTunes or Spotify or some other podcast platform, welcome. And I'm so excited for you to get into this. Let me give you a couple of the highlights in our time together, because while the episode is a little over an hour, it felt like 15 minutes to me. Pat has coached me more times than I can count. He has changed my life more times than I can count. He was one of the coaches that helped me when I was going through my divorce. He's coached me on sales. He's coached me on time management, team building, hiring and firing, and building models to support those in my business. So many different things over the years of knowing Pat. And he's so passionate. You're going to see very quickly that he's got a big personality and he's here to have a lot of fun while changing people's lives. So a couple of my favorite parts of this episode, as you get into it, listen for these and see if these stand out to you too. Pat has more than 40,000 hours of coaching and training experience. And that's not just some number out of the sky. He has tracked that. And you know the 10,000 hour rule, right? Like anybody that has that much experience doing their one thing is going to be dangerously effective at it. Something else that I watched him do that I want to tell you, listen to how effectively he chooses his language, especially as it comes to helping people step into their potential. I watched him sell out a room of about 100 plus people, and 100% of them bought his program. Have you ever seen anybody do that? And part of it is Pat is a master of language and asking questions and helping people understand when they're making up excuses, when they're making up some kind of story that doesn't serve them, and squashing that like a bug. So listen carefully for that as you go through the episode. Also pay attention to how Pat built a company from $0 to $1 billion in sales in 4 years. That speaks enough. I don't have to give you any context to that, right? I mean, come on. Also, you'll hear why he would call his cocktail. When I asked him, if we turned you into a cocktail, what would it be called? He said I can't believe he said that. And if you're listening and you know Pat, you know he has a reputation for being bold in what he says and how he coaches. Also, pay attention to the breakthroughs that Pat has had, the failures he's had when it comes to building a team and hiring for that team. He's got a couple real gems packed into that section, including why it costs you as an organization, why it costs you 4 to 5 times someone's salary if you don't hire the right person. So in other words, the wrong hire costs you 4 to 5 times what you would pay that person. Isn't that remarkable? So listen to a couple of those things. Obviously, you're going to get your own breakthroughs as you go through the show. And thank you to our sponsor, Heaven's Door, for the delicious bourbon that we tried in this episode. If you scroll down in the show notes, you'll see links to buy the Heaven's Door bourbon that we were into. And you'll also see links to Pat's content if you want to go follow him or work with him. You'll also see ways to work with us at Goodman Coaching. So I trust as you go through the episode, you'll have multiple breakthroughs. Do us a favor. Share those on social media, tag us at Goodman Coaching or at Bourbon and Breakthroughs, and let us know what really stood out to you. And thanks again to Pat, who always brings so much to our audience. And guys, I can't wait for you to dig in. So I'm going to shut up, get out of the way, let you explore this bourbon and learn from one of the best, Pat Mancuso. All right, welcome back, everybody, or welcome to, for the first time, if you haven't joined us before, to Bourbon and Breakthroughs. Today, I'm here with my friend and a wonderful coach, one of the best coaches I've ever had the pleasure of working with, Pat Mancuso. Pat, thanks for taking time out of your calendar to drink some bourbon and talk about your breakthroughs.
Chris, I am excited to be here. What an opportunity.
So if you don't know Pat, he's choosing that word very carefully. He doesn't believe in saying problems or complaining. He turns everything into an opportunity. So I don't know if I was a problem and I became an opportunity, or I just happened to fit into either way. I'm going to run with it. And thank you to our sponsor today. This is Heaven's Door is sponsoring us. If you don't know anything about Heaven's Door yet, this is Bob Dylan's brand of bourbon that is it's new to the scene. Pat and I were talking before I hit record here that we're both connoisseurs, but he had never seen this. This is new to me, other than our work together on the episodes. It is hitting the market fast, though. I'll say that, and I think we're about to find out why, Pat, because you haven't tasted it yet, right?
I have not, and interestingly enough, Bob Dylan is from this area.
So there are a couple reasons. It's funny you bring that up. There's a couple reasons that I bring this bottle to you today. The first one is for that reason, that there's a tie geographically, but more it's about that today we're trying their double barrel expression.
Whoa.
So whoa. So I have not tried. I've purposely waited to get a real authentic expression from myself about like, okay, what's this taste like? How's this hit? But I do want to read you a couple of notes. This particular expression, I'm going to keep showing the camera. So if you're watching me on YouTube, you can see the bottle. If not, and you're just listening to our podcast today, it's a really cool bottle. The art on there features lots of different things. We've been sitting around interpreting what these all mean. But there is definitely an element of iron on there. And if you know anything about Bob Dylan, he's fascinated by gates and iron work and all kinds of expressions of art. And this bourbon is just another way for him to express that passion. But this particular one, the double barrel whiskey, is comprised of a unique blend of 3 different whiskeys. So, Pat, I didn't want to give you one. I wanted to give you 3. That's no.
I love it. I love it.
2 of the whiskeys are from Tennessee with a traditional bourbon mash bill, and there's mixed in a straight rye whiskey. So I'm really excited to try this one because rye is usually my favorite. Each of these 3 whiskeys is aged independently in new oak barrels and then dumped. Before that, though, they age them for 6 years. So we're getting something that's got a lot of character. The barrels are heavily charred, so you're going to get lots of vanilla, lots of flavor out of there. And the really cool thing is these are maple charcoal filter mellowed after distilling. So this is called the Lincoln County process, and that's just part of what makes this double barrel expression so unique. So that, and I always try to pair the bottle to the guest. And for this one, I was thinking about, what would fit Pat Mancuso. And I'm laughing because I know a bunch of people listening to this know you. They've been in the coaching room with you. They know your energy. They know how many thousands of hours of coaching you have. They know you are a blend of all kinds of things. You are yet unique in your own right.
Yeah.
You are smooth, my friend. You are definitely smooth, but you're potent at the same time.
Oh yeah.
And at 100 proof, this was the right expression to do that. But lastly, there's definitely an altruistic factor, a heavenly factor about Pat Mancuso. He means to do well in the world, and he does do well in the world, but he does it with a serious punch.
I love it.
So let's get into it.
I'm going to take that, Chris, and I'm going to use that. I'm speaking in a couple of weeks down in Florida. I'm going to open with my intro. That's going to be part of my intro.
I have found if you give everybody a little bourbon before your introduction in your speech, everybody's a little happier.
There you go, a little happier. A little happier.
Well, perfect. Well, let's get into it. I'm going to open my...
Oh, do I get to open mine too?
You get to open yours too, and you get to drink it too. So I'm going to see if I can capture some of this for everybody listening here. The cool thing about their tall bottles is it gives you a really satisfying glug right out of the bottle there.
Yeah.
Well, cheers, Pat. Thank you for being on today.
Cheers, Mr. Goodman. Thank you so much for having me. So I always have to sniff it first. It's not like a wine, but that, oh, man. Okay.
I got impatient. I just dove right into it. After reading all about that, I just got right into it.
Wow. That is good. That is really good. Now, do we have to do the rest of the episode? I mean, that was enough for me, Chris.
I got to build you up and then I got to tear you down. It's just part of my process.
There you go. Works for me.
I mean, I'm really impressed. I'm not just saying that because they sponsored us. I'm really impressed that the rye bite afterward,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
that flash of pepper.
Yep.
So, any particular thoughts or things come to mind as you drink that for the first time?
Well, first it is really smooth and it does have a bite, and so it's different. It's very unique, and I like that. I like that in a bourbon, and I like the mix, and I could taste the you described one of the elements to it, and now it's escaping me, but it's really good. I mean, it's really good.
So for everybody watching the video or listening to us, I'm going to read you a couple of the notes. On the nose, you get maple. Definitely hit me, like as I poured it, I could smell that maple filtration. Milled grains, nuttiness, dried berries, vanilla. That's what I tasted.
That's what I really impacted was the vanilla.
Yeah. That's loads of vanilla in a good way. Almost like it makes me think of eggnog almost, right? And toasted oak naturally. On the palate, their notes say toasted caramel, fried dough, dark cherry, lemon, oak, vanilla bean. This one I definitely got dried apricot.
Yeah.
And it kind of lingers. That one kind of like washes around the tongue a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then warm butterscotch with woody overtones.
There's a lot going on in this. There is a lot going on, and it's I love it. Oh my gosh, I love it.
Wouldn't you love somebody to describe you as warm butterscotch like with some woody tones?
I've been described as a lot of things, but that hasn't been one of them. That's for sure.
Well, let's talk about that. I'm sure people have had some choice words for you. How would you describe your style of coaching? There are so many coaches these days. It's hard to know the difference between a consultant, a coach, a mentor, a guide, a teacher, a facilitator. In English, we just don't have, in my opinion, a word that really suits the type of coaching you do. But I'm curious, like, what do you think your style is like and why?
I think first, and this is from my perspective, I think people feel that, but committed. I think in anything, Chris, that you do, I always believe God gave people certain gifts, and I'll take me in this case. I think God gave me gifts that I have a responsibility to utilize and to impact people. And, I was at a breakfast this morning with a client, and we've done some great work for him. I've known him forever. He owns a business. He owns a very successful business. And yet there's things that he's doing, decisions that he's making. And the commitment part is I care enough to tell him. I care enough to have that conversation with them. And whether it's a coach, a consultant, a mentor, sometimes you need to be there, just as a friend. You need to, it's not about, there's sometimes when it's not about business and it's about life. And, I have a client right now who's going through a divorce, and, my belief is always life and business intersect. And when one is out of balance or one is challenged, the other one is challenged. You can try to mask things as much as possible, but it just doesn't work. So, in that case, I can get on a call and I could be a coach or consultant, but in that particular call, that wasn't what he was needed. What he needed was somebody to go, hey, I understand what you're going through. And I mean, I've never been through divorce, hopefully never will, but I can understand the human aspect of it. I can understand the emotional aspect of it because of all the training I've had and training I've done. So I think one of the words is committed. I think the other one, Chris, is you got to care enough to tell people what they don't want to hear, but they need to hear. Because my mentors and my coaches over the years have done exactly that for me. And without that, the trajectory of my life wouldn't be where it is today. And so you got to care enough and understand that, again, I think you were put in a position, you were given the opportunity. I always believe everything happens for a reason. That might be my faith. It just might be my experiences. But I think when you're in the roles and you're in this same type of role in what you do in your consulting and coaching, I'm not worried about if they don't like what I have to say. I'm not worried about if they don't like me. What I'm worried about is if I don't say it, and then their trajectory of their life goes in a different way. And I watch that and I go, I could have helped them with that, and I didn't. I chose not to.
How do you discern? Because I've been on the receiving end of this with you more times than I can count. And it's funny that you mentioned divorce, because it's been so long. Like, I just recorded a podcast about this maybe a month ago, that the anniversary of my original wedding date, my first wedding date, came and went this year, and I didn't even notice. And you were the coach that I was working with through the program Bold. If you're in real estate, if you're with Keller Williams, you probably heard of Bold.
Right.
But it's not just a coaching program. It's really about building a lifestyle, about not just becoming your best, but really leaning in and using the skills and the opportunities that you have and that are in front of you. And it's a tough program, and you're not an easy coach. And I mean that in a loving way.
Yeah.
But I was going through that program with you when I went through that divorce. And so for me to look up this year and have the anniversary of that wedding come and go and not even think about it was like, oh, wow, I'm actually on the other side of that. All the work that I put in during that period, during that season, and what I learned in coaching and how to use those, not just mindset skills, but also real skills. Like, I don't know if you remember, but you were leaning into everybody like you always do. And I was going through this divorce, but because of how you were rallying everybody, I felt totally supported. And I sold 6 houses in 7 days right after I found out I was getting divorced.
Yeah.
and I'm smiling and laughing about it now, because I'm like, I think that's what people discount about coaching, is how deep it can reach into your mindset, your skill set, your income, your lifestyle, your happiness. And I think because you and I, we live and breathe this coaching thing, this consulting thing, this personal growth thing, it's easy for us to maybe discount that.
Take it for granted. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And, it's interesting because I'll get people years after years, and somebody mutually that I know, and we impacted her life 15 years ago. And I took a stand for her and took a stand for her potential. One of the things that I think, again, for me in thinking as a coach and consultant, is I know that every human being on this earth has more potential. I believe it in every bone of my body. And the only reason I believe that is because I believe that in myself. You can't see potential in others that you don't see in yourself, which means that as a coach and as a consultant, if I don't pull them out of that or push them towards it, then really I'm doing them a disservice, but I'm also doing me a disservice in my growth. Because if for example, this individual, it was very transformational in their life, and that transformation now has impacted their child in the development of that, because they did something that they'd never done before, that they didn't think was possible. And so a great coach really comes from inside of the coach. It's their skill set, their experiences, the ability to dig and not worry about how uncomfortable that might get. I'm not worried about my discomfort level. What I'm worried about is if I don't get somebody that I'm coaching or consulting uncomfortable, they'll never make a change. And I think that's what always drives me. And it drives me so much that I don't even typically think about the conversation. It's kind of like the unfiltered. And you said there's some people who that makes them uncomfortable. And I get that. But I guarantee you, if they continue down the path that they're usually on, they're going to be way more uncomfortable. So think about in your case, and this happens a lot, I'll use the example in divorce. Think about in your case, if you held on to that divorce. And I know, a lot of the background of what happened there. And for anyone, that would be real easy to hold on to. And yet if you hold on to it, you can never move forward. You can't bring something else into your life because you're holding on to something that's filling up that space.
Yeah.
And you have to create a gap in the space to bring other things in. And so the fact is that if I don't take a stand for you and your greatness and your potential, you can never fill it because you're holding on to something. So I think in the reality is, a lot of people don't have, and I say this not disrespectfully, it's just a fact. A lot of people don't have the training, don't have the skill level. Coaching is not something, or consulting is not something you go, okay, I'm a coach or consultant. I mean, I've got probably 40,000 hours of coaching and consulting in my journey of this space. And those are real numbers, by the way. Those aren't made up numbers.
No, I can vouch for that. Yeah.
And I know that it's just sometimes people hear that and go 30 or 40,000 hours of coaching. Yeah. And that's what gives you the skill level, because you get into a situation and you might not handle it exactly the right way. I'll never forget this situation. I was in a room and we were in a boot camp. You mentioned Bold, and Bold was really a boot camp. It was a 7-week boot camp. And we're presenting a piece of content, and one of the people in the room broke down right in the room, and immediately got up. 3 or 4 people run out because this individual had broken down. And it's hard in a setting of 150 people, and this was a very large room, to stop, and the focus goes to this individual. And I had no idea what happened. I had no idea what I said, if it was something I said or impacted. So I was fortunate to be able to transition, put the group in an exercise, and walk out of the room and have a conversation with this individual. And what came out of it, Chris, was really interesting. I asked the individual a question, and the response was very interesting. And yet most people wouldn't have picked up on the response, what was going on. But basically, this individual had an experience in their life where they lost someone. And this individual that they had lost was very close to them, an integral part of their business, a business partner. They were in real estate. This was a business partner in another industry, but that they were very connected. And I asked this individual, how long ago, I said, well, what happened in this? And the response was, well, I just lost a very good friend. I just recently lost a very good friend. Now, Chris, if I said that to you, I just recently lost a very good friend, what would your initial response be, thinking about a timeline for that? I just recently lost someone.
I would say within a few months.
Yeah. And that would have been the untrained coach hearing that. Not that you're the untrained coach. What I'm saying is that would be the natural response for most people. Mm-hmm. The way she said it, the tonality, the recently tweaked me to the point where I said, well, how long ago did this happen? And she said 3 years. Wow. Now, the point to this conversation is, and I gave you an unfair question because I just said this, but the room, the tonality, and your response was exactly what most people would respond. And that's what I asked you for, was that response. Not as a coach, just as you hearing it. Mm-hmm. Well, I knew there was something else there. And she said 3 years ago. And I went, okay, so now I understand why the response was triggered by whatever happened at that time in the room. But the point that I'm trying to make is, just like with your divorce, if you hold on to things that long, A, you haven't learned, right? You can only move forward if you learn. But B, you're now filling a gap with something that isn't benefiting you. And that was the conversation. That was the transition. Was, okay, I totally respect, and the grieving process is different for different people. I get all of that. I've had major loss in my life. You know that. And so it's not something that I haven't ever experienced, and I've experienced it at a super high level. And yet, if you hold on to it, you can't fill it with something else. So great coaches understand that. They're intuitive, they listen, they're trained. And that's why the work that you're doing, is just amazing, because the skill level that you have, and part of where that skill level comes from, Chris, is you've experienced it. Mm-hmm. You've experienced the journey of some of these setbacks and some of these successes. And I don't think as a coach, I know as a coach, you can't coach at the highest level if you haven't done some of these things, if you haven't experienced some of these things.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that, first of all. And I totally agree. I think it's, I think it's one of the first rules of leadership that you have to be willing to go first.
Yeah.
And that's, for a lot of people, that's a threshold of discomfort, of chaos. I was laughing today, like the whole day has been chaos. My wife runs her own business. I run my own business, and we have our family that we run together. But every single one of those was a little bit chaotic today compared to how we thought today was going to go, as is normal every day in business, right? And in family. But it's funny. I still get up some days and think like I have a plan and it's going to go somewhat, like that plan. But I do think there's a level of uncertainty that comes along with taking on leadership, coaching, consulting, and really like any kind of business ownership, especially. What do you think makes people like you, especially, excited to lean into that discomfort and excited to pursue that?
There's a few things. If you're not uncomfortable, you're likely not growing, which means you're staying stagnant. And for me, that doesn't work. In fact, it's probably a blind spot for me. If you ask most people what one of my flaws is, they would likely tell you my impatience level. And my impatience level is not an impatience level. I just know that things can be better, and I want to experience them to be better, and I want other people to experience them to be better. And so I'm always, there's a difference between not satisfied and content. And for me, I'm always content, but I'm never satisfied. And what that means is from my perspective, is I'm content with what I've done and what I've experienced, but I'm not satisfied that I couldn't do more. And it's not want more, it's do more. It's be better, it's improve, it's deliver a better experience. It's and you and I haven't had a chance to necessarily talk about this, but we've scaled a pretty successful company in the last 14 months. And we just engaged our 600th business owner earlier this week.
Wow.
And that has happened because of a number of things, but really it's happened because of a commitment level and a desire to not be satisfied with an initial goal that we blew through in like 35 days. And so that's a flaw. People look at that as a flaw, and I just look at it, that's who I am, and it's okay if you don't like it. It's okay if it doesn't work for you. One of my greatest mentors in the world, who I wouldn't be sitting in this chair today, said to me one time, he said, I got a great book for you to read. And he says, you can write the title down if you want. And he says, the book title is Your Opinion of Me Doesn't Matter to Me. And he said, now, I want you to read the book, but you really don't need to read the book. You can just absorb the title. I've never read the book, Chris, but I absolutely is in my who I am. That's my belief. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't want feedback. It doesn't mean that I don't want criticism. But if you're not for me and you're going to criticize me, I don't really care. It's not important to me to bring that crap into my world. And so I just think we all have more potential. I think God gave us all gifts, and I think we underutilize those gifts. And somebody once told me, with responsibility, with success and in fortune comes responsibility. And I think there's a lot of people who have it. And part of the reason we don't solve some of our problems in the world is because not everybody steps up.
I agree. I think it's one of the reasons that I wanted to do this podcast, because sharing something, there's a different level of community when you share with somebody, right? Like there's like inviting them to dinner. It's a different experience than just giving them a few dollars. When you sit down and you have some real sense of connection, granted it's bourbon in this case, but it could be anything. And I think that opens the doors for, like you were saying, you can let go of a lot of other things and let some real goodness in.
Yeah.
I do want to go back. You mentioned something, and I know several of my clients are struggling with this, so I want to dig in about your opinion doesn't matter. You said, I care about your feedback, and I want to improve and be more effective, in so many words. How do you, as a business owner, let's say somebody who's just now reaching a point in business where their team is expanding quickly, they're probably in real discomfort because they're used to doing the work, and now they're playing the leadership game and the motivation game, and that's a totally different chess game versus checkers before. If somebody's in that position, how do they learn to care about the feedback from the individuals on the team as they grow this and they do uncomfortable things, but not take it so personally that they feel like a bad business owner? I'm doing this wrong. You know what I'm
I
asking?
do. And it's a great question. And a lot of business owners struggle with that. And I think first and foremost, it starts with, do you have the right people around you? And part of my background is organizational development with you have to start hiring the right people. And if you hired the right people, when you hired them, you gave them permission to be brutally honest with you, just like you asked for their permission to be brutally honest with them. So if they give you feedback, it's not because they want to harm you, it's because they want to help you. And so that feedback is embraced. I think you know this, but maybe you don't. So my daughter has worked with me for about 5 years, and she's amazing. And she, in my opinion, is like a mini me, a younger me, very smart, and she has very strong opinions. And when I bring some things to her sometimes, she'll push back on me. And I'll push back on her maybe a little bit, but the majority of the time she's right. And so you have to be open to that feedback from the people around you that you care about. And yet, if it's not people you care about, if it's not people in a position that are partners with you, then you don't really have to pay any attention to the feedback. Is my perspective. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I have a whole bunch of people over my entire life that really weren't in my world, but boy, did they have opinions of me. And there were times when I would struggle with that. And when I struggled with it, what I realized is the longer I struggled with it, the more it impacted me going forward. So are you getting feedback from the people around you? You bring up something, and Dr. Randy Ross is somebody who I interviewed on my podcast over the years, and he's written some amazing books. And in one of his models, he talks about, and I can't remember exactly how he describes it. He's got a phrase for it, but basically the exercise is, if you took your spouse, partner, significant other, if you took a business associate and you said, okay, I want you to tell me everything, give me all the feedback around me, about me. Well, what do you think they would tell you first? They tell you the good or the bad?
I think they would probably start with the good.
Of course, they're going to start with the good. And when I say the bad, I don't mean bad like isn't bad, but they're going to start with the good.
Yeah.
And then as soon as they transition to the things that would make you uncomfortable, we all get defensive. Again, if you get defensive, you can't grow. I'm not saying it's easy, but I always look at it this way, Chris. If somebody's willing to share that feedback, they care. If they're in my world, if they're in my circle. But there was a whole bunch of people over my entire life that said, you're too aggressive. You're too aggressive. And for years, I took that on. And as in aggressive was a bad thing. And one of my mentors, who's now deceased but changed my life, Bain Henyon, he opened my world from a behavioral standpoint and basically freed me from that aggressive was a bad thing. I remember a story one time when he was consulting with me, and he said, let me ask you a question. If you were in a building burning, would you want somebody to come get you who was passive or aggressive?
Right.
Well,
and it's also all over your life, down to the car you drive. But sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, go with that. I love that.
Well, I think that's it. I think we deny our nature, and it's like, you're talking about Bain Henyon. If people don't know who he is, he's one of the country's most formidable consultants, and revealed to people how their behavior informed their decisions, how they should build a team, how they should align people into roles. I mean, really groundbreaking work that reached way beyond a behavioral assessment.
It did, yeah.
Right. And I think it also taps into, who is this person that's across from me at their core? Because if we can figure that out and then pair them to an opportunity, man, look out.
Yeah.
And I think that's it, is at a really high level of leadership, we're able to dig down to that level and give people permission to embody that and actually go out and be hot, fast, aggressive, or whatever else, and not, and stop the stories that prevent them from embracing it.
Well, and Chris, you go back to, again, fundamentally the piece of, well, I have people around me and they're going to give me feedback. Well, if you, and again, this is our belief, if you took them through a hiring process that was at the highest level, you'd not be in an employee-employer relationship. You'd be in a partnership relationship, even though you might be their leader, you might be their superior, you might be their boss. But it's a partnership relationship, and therefore you should always be willing to be embracing and open to that feedback. Because if you're not, that's going to be a problem somewhere down the road, whether it's you mentoring or coaching them or them giving you feedback. So if you're not open to feedback, frankly, that's a little bit egotistical, and you probably have too much ego, and you should get out of your own way. And maybe you shouldn't, maybe you shouldn't be running the company.
Okay, why do you say that?
Because there's people who are owners of companies who shouldn't be running companies. They're great at certain things, but they may not be great at running their own company. They may not be the right person to be doing what they're doing. When we do organizational assessments, and that, we go into an organization and we do a 360 of the company, and we get feedback on the owner. We get feedback on what the owner's doing on a daily basis. And I'll ask the owner a question, what are your top 5 things that you do every day? And they'll identify them. And then we'll list what are the top 3 things that you enjoy the most. And they're never connected. All the things they do, it's not what they really enjoy doing, which means they're probably not really good at them. Mm-hmm. So they should get out of the way and let somebody who's really good at them do that. And what's interesting, you and I haven't even had a chance to talk about this, but one of the things that we're bringing into our organization, and again, this is somebody who came into my world and brought me clarity, is that you ask most business owners what their goal is. So what's your goal? And they'll give you a number. Mm-hmm. They might give you I want to retire in 5 years. And yet when you ask them why, so I went through this recently with this consultant, and we've engaged them. We've hired them to take us to the next level in my company. And he said, "What's your goal 10 years from now?" And I told him, and he said, "Why?" And I looked at him. I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Well, that's kind of a problem." He said, "Because if your goal is to let's just say hypothetically, I want to build a $50 million company. Well, why do you want to do that?" "Well, because I want to sell the company at a certain point." "Well, how do you know the 50 million is the sale number? How do you know that's the net number? How do you," and he started asking me all these questions, and I'm like, holy crap. Now the aha moment happened where if you don't, and this is how he describes it. I'm in Florida and I want to drive to Minnesota. I open up the GPS and I don't put the address in Minnesota that I want to get to. Well, how am I going to get to Minnesota in the most direct way? I'm not. And if you think, Chris, and you know this in your work, and as a business owner, I'm making decisions every second of every day that either gets me closer to my end goal or farther away. But if I can't define my end goal, then every decision I'm making every day may be taking me farther away from my goal without even realizing it. Every decision, a decision of acquisition, a decision of investment, a decision to add a new service, all of those decisions are taking you in a direction. But if you don't know the end result, if you don't know how you want to exit your company, if you don't know how you want to take that exit and go beyond that, and it was mind-boggling. And so the work that he's doing is just like, it's a whole nother level of, you got to decide what the end game is. You don't actually have to get off the board at the end of the game. You could change your mind. But if you don't know what the end game is, most people don't know there's 5 ways to exit a business. Did you know that?
No, I wouldn't have counted 5. I would have thought way more than that.
Well, there's 5. There's literally 5 ways to exit a business. Now, each one of those exit strategies has a different tax ramification. It has a different future ramification, but it also has a different ramification building it to that point. Mm. So that's why I said sometimes people shouldn't be running the company.
Well, and I love that because it shows us just how egotistical I say we, because I think every business owner gets in these traps.
Oh, sure.
It's like quicksand that we have to, don't do that again. But then, this looks really appealing. And then we get over there and we get stuck. And so I'm taking a couple things from that. Number one, just the universal nature that we have to monitor our ego and we have to keep it in check, and we need great people around us to keep it in check.
Yep.
And secondly, that you, as one of the best coaches I know, still seeks outside counsel, coaching, consulting, and is willing to humble yourself and put yourself in a position of being completely wrong, maybe even about your goal, when you help people set goals for a living. And I think that's something that it's so worth highlighting, because like yesterday, I had a coaching call with a client for the first time ever. And she said something, and I said something about my coach teaching me this and that. She goes, "Wait, you have a coach?" I was like, "I have multiple coaches." She's like, "Why?" And I said, "What do you mean, why?" She goes, "But you're the coach." And I was like, "What? So doctors don't need doctors, teachers don't need teachers. What are we talking about here?" Right. But I do think that there is, especially for people, like, again, we might take for granted that we've been saturated in a culture that promotes growth, that promotes exploring your edges. And a lot of people are not in that environment. Any thoughts on that?
So first, I would say that every individual has to develop what they want to be. Remember, I said everybody has more potential, and I can see that potential in them. But if they don't want that, that's not my decision. Mm-hmm. In other words, I got to be okay with somebody who wants to make $100,000 a year, work 40 hours a week, and that's their life. I have to be okay with that. I can't judge it. Mm-hmm. By the same token, they can't judge me. If I want to make $1 million or $2 million or $10 million or $100 million, they can't judge me, because that's my choice. That's my decision. And what I do with my money and my resources is my deal. And yet, everybody in the world is judging. So I think, that would be the first thing. And then the second thing, and again, this is just in my journey, and it always hasn't been perfect, is I've now really discovered that at a high level, if you want to go to a high level, again, it all depends upon where you want to go, and where you want to go is where you want to go. No one else should dictate what that is. But what you should do is define where it is, and then define how you're going to get there. And maybe you want to get there in 3 years and go travel the world for 3 years. Maybe you want to get there in 10 years and you want to, live a lifestyle for the next 10 or 12, whatever it is. But you got to have people around you to do it. That one consultant that we're hiring just for that portion of our business, to go, I need to get clarity on what that end number looks like, and why and when and how. That's a $40,000, $50,000 a year consultant. Mm-hmm.
And so, how do you determine your ROI on that?
That's a great question. And I think the fact of first is just actually identifying something I've never identified before would probably be worth $500,000, honestly. Because I think if I would have had that clarity years ago, I wouldn't have gotten into business with some of the people I got into business with that I'm no longer in business with. Because again, every decision moves you closer or farther. So I think the ROI will be priceless, to be honest with you. And that's not just a phrase. I believe that. Yeah. This individual's done some amazing work. And it really, if you just use the GPS example, it makes perfect sense. You can't use the GPS unless you know where you're going. And it's not just where, it's why, it's how, it's when, and it's for what purpose. And I haven't read these books yet. These are just been put in front of my world. I can't remember all the titles. I actually have title on my desk, but if I do that, I'll look funky on the camera. But it all has to do with exiting businesses. And one of the books, the research that was done, that says 75% of entrepreneurs who sell their business are unhappy within months of selling it. Mm-hmm. Now, when you think about that, you go, oh my gosh, all that work that was put in to build it and exit it, and within months you're unhappy with selling it, taking millions of, that's crazy. So you got to define what the end looks like, and after what the end looks like. So my answer is I think it's going to be priceless once I get through that process.
Hey, what's up? This is Chris Goodman, and we'll be back to your episode in about 45 seconds. Listen, if you're ready to take your life and your business up to your next level of success, freedom, fulfillment, fun, all of it, you need the help of a top coach. all the best in the world at anything have a great coach in their corner. They can help you identify your goals, develop a plan to achieve them, give you accountability, give you support, give you guidance all along your way up to the top. Now, look, most coaches are created equally, we'll say. They don't perform equally, however. So if you want to get the most out of your coaching, you need to work with somebody who has a proven track record of success. And that's where I come in. I have over 15,000 hours of coaching people just like you. And after coaching countless entrepreneurs, CEOs, executives, influencers, real estate agents, you name it, I've probably coached them. I can do the same for you. So what are you waiting for? Go ahead and contact me. Go to GoodmanCoachingInc.com. That's GoodmanCoachingInc.com. Fill out the quick application and let's talk about coaching you to your goals. Now let's get back to the episode. I think the stigma is coming down. I think maybe 10 years ago, it was like, you're the business owner. Why do you need a coach? Why do you need a consultant? And then there's the expense of it too, because you said that consult, and I'm going to choose that word on purpose.
Yes.
Some people would look at that and say, that's a $40,000 to $50,000, maybe even $60,000. That's a salary. That's a new team member that could solve more problems every single day, blah, 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 blah. And I see that as an absolute investment. If they're going so macro and stretching how that business owner thinks and therefore how the team operates, that, yeah, I mean, we really have to start looking at why wouldn't you? And that's where it gets really interesting, because that's where we start to call you out on all the excuses of, and I'm not just trying to pitch coaching, because
right.
Like we talked before I hit record that I'm looking at hiring some social media help. And even in something like that, I start to ask, like, what would it take to get the ROI there? But in coaching, it's a little amorphous, because if it dynamically shifts how you show up and who you're being, how do you put an ROI on that? Right? Like,
I see where you're going, Chris, but here's the thing for me is that, so let's just look at coaching, and I'll use an analogy of baseball and high school kids. So you have coaches in high school who make very little money, right? I mean, they're highly underpaid in most high schools. They struggle to find coaches in high school. But those high school coaches can impact that kid developing, boy or girl, baseball, softball, volley, whatever it is. They can impact that development of that child, which impacts their ability to get scholarships, which impacts their ability to choose different colleges, which impacts their ability in some parts of the rest of their life. And we're worried about in schools how much we pay coaches, not understanding that how much they have an impact. And one wrong decision, by the way, so let's go back to the consulting of organizational development and hiring people. Most studies will show the wrong hire is 4 to 5 times their salary in 1 year. Consultants don't cost a fraction of $80,000 salary times 4 or 5 in a year. I mean, some do. There's some consultants that charge $250,000, $500,000 a year. And but yet it's so if they're always looking at ROI in coaching, I think they're looking at it from the wrong perspective, because the ROI doesn't show up until after you hire the consultant or the coach. I mean, you got to do your due diligence. You got to understand what you're looking for as an outcome for coaching. And that's first and foremost. I think sometimes people get into coaching and it's the magic pill, it's the magic brush, and you're going to make me perfect. And the fact of the matter is, we can't change who you are. We just can only change what you do. And in order to change what you do, you have to make a decision first to do that. I can tell anybody the model to make money, and so can you. But the first decision that somebody has to make is, do you actually want to make more money? You have to make that decision. Mm-hmm. And if you don't want to make that decision, well, then, hey, I'm a great coach, but you're not like a great client. I mean, seriously. Well, I fired somebody not too long ago, and I was like, okay, we talk about the same thing every week after week, month after month. 6 months later, you're still not doing what you said you were going to do. Sorry, I suck as a coach. You need to get a new one. So you have to make a decision first, and then I have this model. Second, you have to make a commitment. So everybody goes, okay, I'm ready to go. I'm going to get into coaching. Okay, well, what are you committed to do in coaching? Wow, that's an interesting question. I go, well, if you're not committed to, and I'll use the word consulting because coaching consulting is a little bit different. But as a consultant, I say, so what are you willing to do? And they go, well, I don't know. And I go, okay, well, the only way this is going to work is that if I consult you and I tell you what to do, you need to go do it. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, otherwise, if you're not committed to do it, then why do we even have a conversation? It's all great. So the second thing is a commitment. And I mean an all-in commitment, Chris. I'm not talking about a half-hearted, I don't want to swear on your podcast, but
I think you'd be the rarity if you didn't.
Yeah. Okay. Half-assed commitment. Yeah. So too many people are like not committed. They're committed when it's good and it's fun and it's comfortable. But as soon as it gets a little uncomfortable, I'm not committed. I don't want to do that. And it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. Now, by the way, we're all humans and we're all imperfect and we all have flaws, right? So there are times when I'm not committed to do something. But when I'm not committed, I understand I'm not committed. And I go, okay, today's done. It's over with now. Tomorrow, I better get back on the horse because if I don't, a couple days of being uncommitted just leads to the rest of my life being uncommitted. So it's a commitment level.
A couple of days of being uncommitted leads to the rest of your life being uncommitted?
Yeah. So that's the habit of being uncommitted. Only takes 2 or 3 days to break a habit. Takes a long time. There's a lot of research on, is it 66 days? Is it 90 days? Nobody's perfect. And I'm sorry, you're going to have days. You're going to have life. Stuff is going to happen. And okay, well, I broke the habit. Now I got, now I'm terrible. No, you just had life happen. There's a certain reality or realism to what we experience. And I think sometimes people there's no benefit of the doubt. There's no, hey, it's okay. I took off a day today. It's okay. But I better be back on it tomorrow.
Well, I like, my coach has this saying, when you need to be extra on, you need to be extra on. Like, you know when it's time to crank it up, and when responsibility is calling or opportunity is knocking. And a lot of us just play this game where we convince ourselves, it'll work out. And I hope, I think it'll work out, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let me shift gears back to one thing you said, because I think this is fascinating. The idea that hiring the wrong person just on average costs 4 to 5 times their salary. I remember being in the room. Incidentally, it was with Bain Henyon. It was I got to go up there and train with them. And we went around the room, and the average revenue that the companies were pulling in was around 2.5 to 3.5 million. And so we did the math. We actually sat through about 15 minutes of math, which, if you can imagine that many business owners sitting through that was excruciating.
Yeah.
And
it was.
We did it, and it averaged to $200,000+ per bad hire.
Yeah.
In that size organization. So I think the math is right on with what your assessment was. And now I want to take that, and I want to put that in the frame of, can you talk about some of the breakthroughs you've had, maybe war stories where you've learned things to do and things not to do when hiring, so you don't end up with a bad hire?
Yeah. So I'm going to talk in 2 perspectives, because I had a conversation this morning with a business owner. He's I consider him to be a friend. He's also a business that's provided me a bunch of great services over the years. And he's got partners. And I learned this the hard way, okay? When you get into business with partners, it all sounds great in the beginning. You're sitting around a campfire. You got a great idea. Let's develop a bourbon. And so now you develop a bourbon, and you're in business, and things start to take off. And then stuff starts to go sideways, and decisions have to be made, and challenges. And you don't actually know who you're in business with until those things happen. It's real good when things are good.
Yeah, it's great when things are great. Yeah.
Yeah, when things go sideways, you really do know who your partners are. And I said to this individual said to me this morning that we're going to have to make a cash call in one of their businesses. And he said, I'm not sure if all those folks are going to be able to deliver on the cash call.
Wow.
Well, no, but Chris, that's way more common because again, we get into business because we're buds. We have an idea.
Yeah.
And the one thing I learned in my life, because I learned this the hard way, because I did this. And this was before I learned as much as I know today about people and about having a model to hire. Because even though they were partners and we weren't hiring each other, we really were hiring each other just as investors. And what I've discovered is that when you don't have a model to hire people, you hire people entrepreneurially, which means when you hire them entrepreneurially, a lot of what you do is okay when you hire them entrepreneurially, but you likely make a whole bunch of mistakes doing that. For example, I don't know if this has ever happened to you. Somebody comes into your world, you start interviewing them. And if they're like you or have some common interest with you or whatever, you go, wow, this person's great. They'd be really great to work for. Immediately right there, you're toast because now you have a bias.
Okay.
And then that bias is a part of every other interchange experience you have with them. And that bias gives you a blind spot and you miss things. Remember the individual who said, I just had a loss. I just recently had a loss. Without a different type of listening capability, you have a bias to go, oh my gosh, it must have just happened recently. I'll never, ever, ever forget this conversation. I had a client who was going to hire a leadership person in a real estate franchise. And part of my deal as a consultant with my clients is if you're going to hire somebody, I get to interview them before you hire. Otherwise, I'm not going to coach you.
Really?
Well, here's the reason, Chris, because if they hire the wrong person, guess who's going to spend time cleaning that up? They're going to come to our conversation and go, what do I do about this crappy person I just hired? Well, why did you hire him in the first place?
Great
and
point.
So this individual comes to the call and they said, hey, I'd like you to talk to this leadership person I'm going to hire. And I said, okay, not a problem. And they give me all the behavioral stuff. They give me everything. So I get this person on the call. And I said, so what's your goal in the next 12 months as part of this leadership role? And their job was to recruit. So their job was to grow the business. And they said, well, I want to grow it by 12. I went, okay, that sounds awesome. By 12 what? Well, by 12 agents. I go, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Now I have no idea what 12 means, right? So I'm playing the game. I go, so 12 by when? She goes, well, within the first year. I said, wow, that is an amazing goal. And I carry on the rest of the conversation with her as if nothing happened. In the back of my mind, I'm going, 12? Okay. So I already knew we had a problem, but I called up the owner and I said, well, I had a great call with Sally Smith. And I'm just curious, did you ask Sally what her goals were in this role? He goes, well, no, why? And I said, well, let me ask you a second question before I answer that. Did you tell her what your goals were? He goes, yeah. I go, what did she say? Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about those goals. My third question to him was, so what are your goals? Well, we want to grow the market center by 150 agents in the next 12 months. I said, oh my gosh, this is so amazing.
Wow.
So your goal is 150, her goal is 12. He goes, what? I go, your goal is 150, her goal is 12. He goes, well, how do you know it's 12? I said, because I asked her. Did you ask her? No. He was all ready to hire her. He was all ready to make her an offer. Bias, total bias is why people make bad hiring decisions. And now that's the first biggest one is bias.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
The second one is need. I just need to hire somebody so I can offload what my issue is. I can offload what my problems are. Again, that's a bit of bias, but they hire out of need because they're just sick of doing whatever they're doing.
Yeah, I think the way I first heard that was don't hire for relief. And I like that word because that's what it feels like. It's like, just give me a little bit of something, extra space, extra time, extra income, anything. If it feels like that desperation, that neediness, that relief, that's your cue. And I'm also laughing because I agree. I think everybody who's made hires has learned these the hard way.
Well, sure.
Wish they had. Well, but that's the whole point that we're talking about is if you have somebody in your corner, you might be able to avoid hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of time and stress and well,
you just have to have a model, Chris, to hire. The problem is we hire entrepreneurially, and you have to have a model that takes the bias out. You have to have a model that does due diligence. You have to have a model that asks questions to understand not where they are now. You want to know where they came from. You want to know where they are, and you want to know where they're going. You want to know behaviorally how they fit into the activities that they're going to be responsible to do. By the way, most people don't understand this part. Anybody can do anything for a period of time. Anybody can do anything for a period of time. I went to school and I thought I wanted to be an accountant. And I actually did accounting internships. And I love numbers. I love financials. I teach it. I understand balance sheets. I understand income statements. I love it all. But I discovered early on in my career, I could not be an accountant. Behaviorally, I'm not an accounting match.
I can't imagine you sitting in an accountant's office all day. I just can't.
But so here's the point, though. Could I go do accounting for a period of time? Yes. Could I do it at a high level? Absolutely. Would I hate every minute of it after a period of time? Yes. So what happens is I can do something for a period of time, and over a period of time, my job satisfaction drops down, which means my job performance drops down, which means now I'm impacting the organization, and like nobody might even know or pay attention. So it really has got to be a model, and you got to understand people, and you got to ask a lot of questions. You got to look for patterns. There's so much stuff about hiring, and unfortunately, it's hard. And that's the other thing where people make mistakes. They just don't want to pay the price for it. They'd rather short term the process and go, okay, I got it done. But what they don't realize, and I have this thing that I coach with people, and I say, okay, here's the deal. I want you to always remember this. When you hire the wrong person, at some point, you're going to be sitting in a conference room and you're going to need to have a conversation with them, because many times the wrong people don't know when to leave, and they don't leave. And as much pressure as you put on them, they don't leave. So you're going to have to, at some point, have to fire them. Now, I want you to picture the conversation in the room when you fired them. And they start breaking down and they tell you about their family and they tell you about the job market. And you didn't do the due diligence up front. You took them out of the job market. You put them in a role that they weren't qualified for, maybe weren't the right person for. And now they're going to have to go find another job. And it's your fault because you didn't do your job. How selfish. And that's part of the problem with hiring, is people don't want to pay the price to do it. It's not easy. I have a consulting client down in Florida, and they were scaling up. They're doing an amazing job, or SaaS company, and they wanted some help on hiring, and 4,000 applicants.
Whoa.
4,000 applicants.
Wow.
For a customer support job.
Wow.
Now, here's what's interesting. They hired 7 people. 6 of them have been amazing, because they followed a model. Support. This I'm talking about somebody who makes, 50. I mean, seriously.
Well, this is fascinating, because I'm thinking I think at a high level of business, and I mean multiple millions of dollars in revenue, I think most people would feel like, I don't have to do that. I don't have to follow a process. I don't have to have a model for that role, and almost talk about it condescendingly, as if it's not a human behind that role, and that they don't deserve a process, just like you mentioned. So I think
it's stupid.
It's at least, like, I could go as far as they're innocent and they don't know what they don't know. But at a certain point, it becomes your job to know, as the leader of that business and as the person who is charged with growth of that business. So,
Think of it this way, Chris, and again, I'm very passionate. I am. It's stupid. And let me tell you why it's stupid. Okay. And I'm not calling it an individual stupid or someone who's listening to the stupid, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. In a restaurant, what's the most expensive investment?
Ooh, the space.
Okay. What's the second most expensive investment?
The chef.
No, the equipment.
Oh, really? Okay.
Let's go to what the third most expensive investment is. It might be the chef. It might be the general manager. What's the least expensive investment in a restaurant? The servers. The people who deliver the experience.
Wow. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now I see where you're going with it. At first,
who's the least amount of training? Who receives the least amount of training?
This is so wild. Hang on. You're really bending my mind around this, because I'm thinking back to restaurants we've been to that are known in town for being like the place to go. They have the environment, they have the chef, they have the menu. And our experience has been completely tainted by untrained people. And I don't mean this in a condescending way. I mean it wasn't fair to this server to plop them in this high-end environment and then not train them and not have them really go through an aggressive training program to teach them how to meet guests where they're coming in expecting things. Okay, I'm just fascinated by that.
You get that? Like the customer support person?
Yeah.
They interact with the customer who pays the bill, and yet they're the least trained, the least person. I say disrespect, least person. They're like, people don't understand the long-term value of a client.
Right.
So picture this. Like, I want to change the restaurant industry. It's one of my commitments. My son is a sous chef, and I've lived through his journey in the restaurant industry for, he's 5 years now. So I go to the same restaurant once a month in my community. Let's just say I do. And I spend $150 a month at that restaurant. Now, if anybody listening to this knows, the margins in restaurants are like, the biggest margin in the restaurant is this right here, right? Is the liquor.
Yeah. And
so I go to that restaurant and I spend $1,500 a year once a month. It's actually $1,800 a year. The math works out the right way. Yeah. I just want to make sure. Yeah, math.
Yeah, it's kicking it.
$1,800 a month. Once a month for 12 months. It's $1,800 a month. If one time that server messes up, do I come back? Maybe, maybe not.
It's fascinating, right? So real quick, why do you think restaurateurs or entrepreneurs who fail to grasp that lesson don't learn that lesson sooner?
There's a boy. I could go all over the place there. So number one, do they follow a P&L and know their numbers? Do they know their rate of return? Do they track their customers? Do they have a database? Like, if I owned a restaurant, I would absolutely positively know how many times that customer comes in to eat at my place and how often. I'd want to know the experience. I'd want to know how their service was. Think about even some of the highest end restaurants. They never ask about the experience. They don't know. Here's a great one. We have a restaurant, and we love to eat. We love to go out and eat. It's one of our deals. And there's a restaurant downtown St. Paul. It's part of a national umbrella of restaurants that are owned by I know the guy's name, but anyways,
Eddie V type thing or something.
No,
like that?
It's not Eddie V. It's the guy who owns the casinos in Vegas and owns Fortilla.
The Mafia.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Whatever. I forget what.
I'm just kidding.
This restaurant, we developed an amazing relationship with the one of the servers. Every time I would, in that restaurant was not $150. It was probably $200 for two people. Every time we go to the restaurant in our reservation, we ask for that server. Mm-hmm. We go to the restaurant the last time, asked for the server, he left. Oh. Different experience this time. Now, I don't know why he left. I don't know. I do know where he went. We haven't gone to that place because there's a bad reputation around the food. Which again goes to, I don't know why he left. He had been there for years and years and years. Mm-hmm. But I had a level of expectation when I walk into that place. The experience was consistent because of him. Now, everybody else in the organization has to deliver. But the problem with restaurants, it's a problem. Most chefs, let's just say chefs, started off cooking on the line. They elevated and go, I want more. So they move up to sous chef, general manager, executive, and now they own a restaurant. All that experience dictates what their experience is going to be in the restaurant and how they were trained. So I watch my son and the experiences he's going through. He's had some great people who have influenced him, and he's had some crappy people who have influenced him. And it's a tough restaurant is a tough industry.
Yeah,
absolutely amazing. I mean, long hours. You're depending upon so many different things. But the point is this: whether it's customer support, whether it's the server, attendant, whatever you want to reference them, it's the people that we don't realize have the biggest impact on our customers. And that's going back to hiring. Most business owners don't understand that.
Yeah.
And if they did, they would make different hires. And if they did, they would lead people differently and they would power people differently. So you know this. I'm not going to tell you something you don't know. Where do most problems in organizations start? They start with the CEO. They start with the business owner, respectfully.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, at the end of the day, listen, the challenges in my business start with me. And if I don't understand that, I've got a blind spot to it.
You never get to graduate out of that problem or that opportunity, I'll say, right?
Well, if you're not continuing to grow and learn, like there's always things you can grow and learn as a business owner. And you should as a leader. You're impacting people's lives, their livelihood, their families. You have a responsibility. So don't hire them if they're not the right people.
We'll do this and then we'll move on. But I think that's one of the biggest sticking points that I hear, because I tend to come into a company or start coaching their executives when things they have been great and now they are not great.
Right.
They are about to be great, but we're hitting tons of turbulence before they're great, something like that. And there's always one or two people on the team, especially when we're like 30, 40 people deep on the team. There's always like one or two that's like, well, this person's been here the whole time, or this person has been integral to our growth to this point. How do you start to ferret out as a skilled consultant whether that person should stay or maybe change seats or should go?
So I'll answer that with a short story if it's okay. So I had a client come in probably 8-9 years ago, and we sat in my conference room and we have this process, and it's the CEO of the company, and we just basically tear them apart, so to speak. And we're asking all these questions, understanding from their eyes, from their perspective, what does the organization look like? And we go through our process and we get to the end. And the reality of it is this guy needed a consultant. He was running a very successful pawn shop in the area. And I mean, very successful. The guy was all over commercials. It was very successful, but it wasn't making a lot of money. So on the surface, it looked like it was successful, but it wasn't making a lot of money. And the reason, in my opinion, my estimation, was because of the CEO. And I was brought into the organization by the CFO. And the CFO knew what was going on because they knew the numbers. So I bring this CEO in and we go through this whole process and I break him down. He starts crying in my conference room, which usually happens in my venues. You know that.
I was like, no, not with you.
Yeah, not with me, because we hit emotion and, everybody has emotion. But anyways, so we get all done and we give him a proposal. And he was like, oh my gosh, this is great, blah, 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 blah. So then I get a call from him down the road a little bit. He says, Pat, we made a decision to go in another direction. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's, it was great to meet you, ... I said, well, just curious, what other direction did you go? Well, I decided to hire a consultant within our industry, i.e. who basically failed running his own business. And so now he's a consultant in the industry and they're going to help us. 6 months later, the company filed bankruptcy.
Wow.
Not my deal. I knew exactly where that company was going. And the problem was they didn't change anything. The consultant changed the marketing, and the marketing wasn't the problem. Yeah,
they changed the symptoms, not the cause, right?
Yeah. So how do you know if you can spot things a mile away? And here's the thing that would really get you. If you ask enough people in the organization anonymously and with a certain process, you'll be able to see very quickly what the problems are.
Yeah.
Because there's common theme to them. Some people have edges, some people have axes to grind, but you could separate those out if you get enough feedback in the organization. And it's not about making people wrong. This was a great individual, absolutely committed to his business. But the problem was he was in a role that he wasn't good at. He was good at certain things, but he wasn't good at leading that organization. And that's why it was in trouble. So if you understand the organization, you understand the people, and they got to understand their roles. Part of the struggle with organizations is they don't have defined roles, which means people don't know what they're supposed to be doing at the time they're supposed to be doing it and who's holding accountable to doing it. So I think that's the biggest thing. is that piece. Again, it goes back to systems. If you don't have systems in the organization, no matter what systems they are, I mean, there's many systems to run organizations, to hire and all that. Just find one and use it and continue to use it.
Yeah.
And understand people, understand behavior. Our core behavior is how we operate in our best, skill zone. You've probably heard, a basketball player go, they score 50 and they go, the hoop was as big as a garbage can lid. Well, they were in their zone. Put people in their zone. Stop putting them in places, and you as the leader being in places you shouldn't be.
I love that part because you're just so clear on that. You shouldn't be doing it all. You shouldn't be in every seat on the bus. You shouldn't be, bouncing around from seat to seat. Well, let me do this because I know we could go another 2 rounds here.
I'm good. Let's go.
Yeah, you don't have a break in this.
I don't. Yeah, listen. I'm so comfortable today in this chair. I knew I bought this chair for my office for a reason.
So I'm telling you, when I started this idea and I was floating it past people I respect, a couple of them were like, well, people are going to get drunk on your show and they're going to put their foot in their mouth. I was like, I really don't think so. I think they're going to lighten up and I think they're going to give us the good stuff.
Oh, I love it.
So,
I love it. I told somebody earlier today I was going on a podcast, Bourbon's a Breakthrough, and they went, can I get on? Sign me up.
Yeah,
I love it.
Right? It's been a blast. And I'm so grateful to you for coming because it's always so much fun. And, I tend to forget that every sentence you say is laced with 30, 40,000 hours of real boots on the ground experience. It's not just conjecture. It's not just hypothetical. And the fact that it tends to come back to the same 5 or 10 things every time.
Fundamentals.
Yeah. Like that we can complicate it all day long. And I think a lot of people make a lot of money out of complicating things. But the best in any industry or trade or even entertainment, they simplify it to something just raw and authentic. And I think you do that. So let me Chris,
can I add something else there? And again, this is just me, but I've had the opportunity to scale massive companies. I mean, I scaled a company from 11 to 800 in 4 years, from 0 to almost $1 billion in sales volume in 4 years. And so it's not that coaches can't coach if they haven't done it. But for me, and I appreciate the compliment and the feedback, if you may, but I've had amazing success and I've had amazing failures. And that, you said 40,000, hours of coaching, and I would add, 35 plus years of being an entrepreneur. And, so that's where that experience comes from, having massive success, having massive failures, and learning from both of them as much as as you need to. So,
well, your style haunts me because I'm laughing because you said something that reminded me. I'm doing a consulting gig with a client right now, and we start every call. We start on time, we end on time. Like I have Pat's words coming out because they work. 35 years of battle tested experience, they work. So let's do this.
You know what I love, Chris? I don't like people when they waste my time because time is valuable and I don't want to waste somebody else's time.
Yeah.
And that's another big piece for me. It's like time is, you don't know how much time you have. You don't, it's just that. So yeah, that's where that comes from.
I appreciate that on such a deep level lately. My daughter just turned 16 months old, and to think about what can take me away from her when I've got time parked to be with her. I'm like, man, there's hardly anything that's worth that anymore to realize like that. Oh, I could treat all of my time that sacred. And that's a different approach. It's definitely a different approach to team building, because why would I waste time with anybody who's not committed to the goal and the vision?
And if you hire the wrong person, you're going to spend way more time with them than you want to. And then you're going to get really upset. And yeah, absolutely.
And I do just want to say that like that happens. I think that's like, I've hired the wrong person probably more times than I've hired the wrong. Yeah, definitely more times than I've hired the right person. Because
do you have a model you're following in a system?
In the beginning, I didn't. And so I was churning through them and we didn't know this was pre-career visioning and this was pre-RTS, RSTLM. Yeah, the bourbon's hitting me. So I think there is a certain level of empathy that you can have. And then there's a level of, I'm stopping this right here. I'm finding another way. I'm finding the who can show me the path. And it's not that, like, if you're listening to this, like, oh, these two know it all, they've got it all figured out. Well, I guess it's really not like that, because it's so dynamic. But I think that's part of the fun of coaching and consulting and being in businesses. If you're challenge activated, right? Like if you enjoy solving puzzles and making things better, there's probably no better arena for you to be in. That doesn't mean you should go it alone. So
this is true. This is true.
Well, I really want to do this because I think it'll be fun. It'll take less than 4 or 5 minutes. This is a section that I did with Todd on his interview, and it was a lot of fun. And it's just a fill in the blank. So I'll set up a sentence and I'll say blank, and then you just got to fill it in. you might refill your drink.
You should do this at the beginning of the call versus at the end of the call.
No, it's way more interesting at the end.
I love it.
Yeah, you might want to refill just in case you put your foot in your mouth. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so the first one is, if you had to write a book on leadership, it would probably be called.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, Chris. I have a manuscript for the book I wrote on leadership. We haven't, we're not done with it yet. But the title is The Leadership Light Switch.
Really? Okay, why?
You can't afford to turn the light switch off at any time because you're always on as a leader. The Leadership Light Switch. That would be that is the title of the book.
I was going to say, we're not playing hypotheticals anymore. It's real.
No. The manuscript's done.
If you had to write a book on hiring, it would be called.
Think about the conference room and the firing process.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Your favorite book on coaching.
Let me change that. There'll be a second title. It's not about you.
I love
that's probably a better one.
I love that. It's a lot more concise.
yeah. Because if it's about you, then you're making the wrong hire.
Ooh, that's so good. Your favorite resource for coaching is?
Oh, MG. I'm a junkie, Chris. That's a hard question.
I can see you sitting on the airplane right now going, which one? Which one?
Like, I have 7 titles of books that I need to buy from Amazon of people that have given me these titles on the exit strategy from your business and how to think about it. Tony Robbins, a holic, Bob Proctor-holic, who just recently passed away. A lot of stuff from Gary, just because I think Gary is an incredible thinker, and not just in real estate. So that's really a hard one for me to answer. There's not real one. In fact, it's probably the opposite. It's a flaw I have. I have so much.
Okay.
Like I'm doing right now, I'm doing about 3 different people on business acquisitions, like buying businesses for $0. And people go, well, how do you do that? It's like, oh my gosh, it's like crazy.
Yeah, this is a whole, I have several clients who have gone in the deep end on that whole situation, and they're Grant Cardone junkies now. And
Grant, somebody else I follow. So
if you could have, other than a Bourbon and Breakthroughs interview, if you could have a drink with any one person, alive or dead, who would it be?
Ooh. People, I'm intrigued by Elon Musk. Because of the way that he thinks. It's not always within the guardrails. Like, how many people would go, okay, change the name from Twitter to X? Like, I don't know if that's the right decision or wrong decision, but frankly, he doesn't care. He's just going to do it because he thinks it's the right decision to do. And somebody who's in so many spaces, we think of Elon Musk as Tesla, but there's so much more than Tesla. There's so much more that is around Tesla that they're doing.
Tesla was never about the cars, right? And I think that's what people don't really.
It's not about the cars. No. And I've watched a couple of places where he was interviewed, and it's just, he just has an amazing way to look at things. And so that would be probably the one that would top the list. I love politics, so it might be a president. I look at George Bush, and some people, that's a hot topic, but he really had to lead our country at a time of just 9/11 was a big deal, and how he handled it. And then what was interesting about George Bush is he handled 9/11, in my opinion, at an amazing level, and then failed with Katrina.
Mm.
So, but you know what's interesting, Chris, is that some of the people I've interviewed on my podcast, some of the folks in the military, I really love people who served in the military because there's just such a different level of commitment to that. So I've interviewed a number of people that serve. I just love talking to people in the military.
Mm. Well, I'll tell you off air. I've got something really cool planned for Veterans Day this year. I'll tell you about that. For everybody
Very
listening,
cool.
Don't worry. You'll get a taste of it.
It was a tease. That was a tease.
Yeah, that was just a little taste. All right, now last one. If you were to make Pat Mancuso into a cocktail, what ingredients would go into it, and what would it be called?
Oh man. Well, ingredients would be bourbon for sure. And I don't know if you put a little red wine in there. I think you would. Okay. This is my journey in the consumption of alcohol. So bourbon, red wine, cider.
Really?
Okay. Yeah. And you told me this at the beginning of the call to come up with a name, and what would it be called? Obnoxious is probably what the first name would be that comes to mind. Can't believe it would be the second, or can't believe he said that would be the second name. Those would be.
If anybody's watching a YouTube right now, they're like, Chris's face is so red, but this is
it is getting red.
It's so spot on for you.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I think those are the two that popped into my mind in the 30, 45 minutes I've had to think about it.
I think if there were ever a drink for Pat Mancuso, it should be called, I can't believe he said that. I thought you were going to say Say Yes Now.
No. I can't believe he said that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I can't believe he actually said that.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. Well, no time. I'll have to think about, can I make a book out of that? But
right, you can easily make it. You can make a whole stand-up bit out of that.
I could make it a stand-up. Actually, I think I'm true story. I think I'm pretty funny, and everybody tells me I'm pretty funny. But my family goes, "You're not funny. You're not."
No one's family thinks they're funny. I mean, come on,
Dad, you're not funny. I go, listen, I'm hilarious.
You can't be a prophet or a stand-up comedian in your own backyard.
I know. There you go. There you go. Yeah.
Well, Pat, thank you so much for the time today. Let's say somebody's listening and they want to work with you. They want to explore consulting, coaching, any kind of capacity of working with you, or they just want to get to know you better. Where should they start?
Probably the best place, Chris, we didn't even touch on this, but we're doing some great work with businesses in the financial area around tax credit, tax recovery. We're helping businesses keep more of their money on their bottom lines. I think entrepreneurs, I know for me, I discovered we work very hard to build revenue, build profit, and frankly, we just don't keep enough of it from the standpoint of things we could be taking advantage of. So there's two places, recovermytaxcredits.com. If a business owner hasn't taken advantage of the employee retention tax credit, that'd be a great place for us to connect. And patmancuso.com is our website for our coaching and our consulting. And those would be the two places for people to get us. Or they just reach out to you and you know how to get in touch with me.
Yeah, well, you guys can also scroll down in the show notes and click the link. Go. That's one of the easiest ways to do it. And let me just give you a quick testimonial, Pat, because it's one thing to say we're helping business owners with their taxes or with their financial strategy or with their hiring models. It's another for me to say this. I connected Pat to two clients that I had that were eligible for what they were doing. The first one got $90,000. The second one got $230,000. And this is in credits. This is in money that
money back to the business.
Yeah, yep. It's money back to, it did not come out of the business's pocket. It did not come out of Pat's pocket. So when I say that, coaches can be worth things way beyond the tangible ROI. This just happens to be a tangible ROI. I happen to know Pat because my mentor connected me to Pat. That's great coaching. That's great connection. But look at the value that becomes exponential. And I'm saying this like, that's multiple salaries in each of these businesses. That's lives change. That's family trees change when they have the opportunity to go back to the market and say, we can finally hire the person to do the thing we didn't think we had the money to do.
Right.
So if you have a business, can you give them a quick couple of parameters if they might be eligible?
Yeah, they had to have W-2 wages in 20 and 21. So they had to have paid wages, W-2 wages 2021, anywhere from 3 employees up to 500 employees.
Okay.
And, the government is very good about helping businesses grow. And, I've talked to 3 business owners before I talked with you. And I don't know what your sense is, but what I'm hearing from the business owners I talk with is things are more challenging now than they ever have been. Although times were good, there was momentum happening during COVID, during some of the challenges. They really are struggling. Like I will just tell you, I got an email right before I jumped on the show from an organization that we helped with their recovery. And her email to me was very simply, our business would have had to close without this.
Wow.
And I'm not going to tell you the business. I would just say this business services the community and services kids and services families. And to hear that, when I read it, I sent her back a text message or an email, and I said, just reading your email gave me goosebumps.
Yeah.
And so, it's really some good stuff that we're doing. If your company was told you're not eligible, I don't know if you are or not until we talk. But I will tell you a number of times people are not getting accurate information on it.
Yeah.
And so we've been able to help 600 businesses in the last 13 months. So we've been very blessed and fortunate. And thank you for those referrals because we're excited to help those businesses.
You said such a key thing, though, that they're getting bad advice or incorrect advice. I'm pretty sure both of the clients that I sent to you were told they were not eligible.
Yeah.
And here they are, checks deposited going,
right.
What?
Yeah.
So,
and there's been a lot of changes, the tax code around just the, tax credits and things, they're constantly changing, and I say this respectfully. I love our country. I struggle sometimes with the way that we do things and things are put out there and they're just not well thought out. And so they go through changes and some of these changes, I had a client the other day and they were told they weren't qualified. I asked them why. I don't know why they're told they're not qualified. And when I got the feedback from the advisor who advised them, they weren't up to date with the changes in the code. And so it was unfortunate because it could have cost this individual hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we don't know that we can help everybody. Not everybody is eligible, but certainly, at least if you are or you're not, what you're saying no to, and that's the process that we go through.
I love it.
So,
well, thanks again, Pat, and thanks to our sponsor. I just want to say real quick, I think Pat hit us with both barrels today, so it's appropriate.
Wait a minute, who's got more? Who's got less? Wait a minute. Here.
It's
pretty close.
Oh, it's the dead heat.
It's pretty close. I think there's a little bit more out of this one.
I think you might have beat me on that one. But look, here I am to polish it off.
No, I got a little bit left too. I'm not moving from this chair. As soon as we're done, I'm sitting right here.
Yeah, you're just gonna get your thinking pad and get going.
There you go.
Well, Pat, thank you. All jokes aside, I'm so grateful for you. You've changed my life. You've changed so many lives of the people I know and respect and clients of mine now. And I think it's just, when I think of you, I think there really are people in the world who are as good as they say they are and who mean to do good work in the world and really help people have their breakthroughs in life, have their breakthroughs in business, and go and do something with their potential that they have. So thank you for all the time that you've invested in me, and thanks for investing in our listeners today too.
Well, Chris, thanks for inviting me, and I mean this from my heart. I'm proud of where you've come from and what you've accomplished, and now what you're doing to impact people, and you're doing some great stuff. You really are, and so I'm honored to be able to come on the show and talk. I mean, anytime somebody lets me talk, I am honored. So
I still can't believe you said that.
The bourbon's pretty good too. So I get to experience this ongoing, right? Like I just don't live with you today. I live with you for however long it takes to get through
for at least 20 drinks, I think. Yeah, that's
yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was gonna say, I still can't believe you said that. That's
said what?
Nothing, just that your drink would be called. I can't believe he said that. I love that so much.
Well, there you go. I mean, I had no idea, and it just came out.
I love it. Well, cheers, my friend. Thank you.
Hey,
and
thanks,
for
Chris.
everybody
Appreciate
listening,
it.
cheers to
Thanks
your
to your
breakthroughs too. We'll see you on the next episode.